My name is Evelyn. I'm 35 years old and married to George, who is 52. We've been together for 16 years and have two daughters, one 14 and the other just 2 years old. For a long time, our life seemed simple and predictable. George worked while I stayed home, caring for our children and managing the household. I thought we were happy, or at least content, but everything changed the day I discovered George had a girlfriend. The truth hit me like a wave of cold water. I felt numb, then angry, then heartbroken all at once. When I confronted him, George denied everything at first. He told me I was imagining problems where none existed. But I could see the guilt in his eyes, the way he avoided looking at me directly. I needed proof, so one night I checked his phone. George caught me and exploded with rage, shouting that I had no right to invade his privacy. His anger only confirmed my suspicions. Later, I looked through his phone bill and found a number he called almost every day. My hand trembled as I dialed it. A woman answered, her voice calm and indifferent. She told me she was also married with children and that if her husband found out, it wasn't her concern. The coldness in her tone made my blood run cold. I confronted George again, armed with this evidence, but he only grew more defensive. He said he would end the affair when he was ready, not when I demanded it. His words stung worse than the betrayal itself. This wasn't even the first time George had cheated. He had done the same thing when our eldest daughter was born. I had forgiven him then, believing he would change. Now, history was repeating itself, and I felt like a fool for trusting him again. I was on maternity leave, unable to work while caring for our baby. We had a loan for our apartment, which was in my name, but depended on both our incomes. George knew I needed him financially, and he used that power against me. He told me he could do whatever he wanted, even see other women, because I had no choice but to accept it. Our eldest daughter tried to reason with her father, begging him to stop hurting our family. But George lashed out at her too, using harsh words that left her in tears. She stopped smiling as much and withdrew from her friends, ashamed of what her father had become. Our younger daughter was too small to understand, but I worried constantly about the kind of home she was growing up in. George stopped coming home at night, claiming he was working late. He wouldn't call or send messages, leaving me awake until dawn, sick with worry. When he finally returned in the morning, he would snap at me for asking questions, telling me he was tired of my complaints. One day he announced he wanted to take a trip alone. I asked if we could go together as a family, but he refused. I knew exactly who he wanted to spend that time with. The financial strain grew worse. George was spending money recklessly on gifts and expensive dinners, clearly for his girlfriend. Our bank account dwindled while our family expenses remained the same. When I confronted him about it, he dismissed my concerns and told me not to worry. But how could I not worry when we barely had enough to pay our bills? The constant stress began destroying my health. I couldn't sleep or eat properly. My body felt heavy all the time, weighed down by exhaustion and anxiety. A doctor told me I needed rest, but rest seemed impossible when my entire world was falling apart. My best friend suggested I leave George, but I felt trapped. Without a job and with 2 children to care for, I didn't see how I could manage alone. My family urged me to be patient, saying George might change eventually, but deep down I knew better. One evening, I prepared dinner and waited for George to come home. I still held onto a thin thread of hope that we could fix our marriage. When he finally arrived, his face was serious and distant. He sat down and told me we needed to talk. My hands started shaking before he even spoke the words I dreaded most. He said he didn't love me anymore. The last piece of my heart shattered in that moment. George said he was leaving. I watched, frozen, as he packed his belongings. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't bother wiping them away. He gathered his clothes, his books, his watch, everything that made our house feel like home. I wanted to beg him to stay, to fight for us, but the words wouldn't come. He hugged our daughters and kissed their foreheads while they cried and pleaded with him not to go. He only sighed, opened the door, and walked out of our lives. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat in the dark, completely alone, and let the pain consume me. I cried until my body ached and I had no tears left. The next morning, I woke up reaching for George's side of the bed, only to remember it was empty forever. Days blurred together. I stopped eating and sleeping properly. I pretended to be fine for my children, forcing smiles while dying inside. One afternoon, I walked past a coffee shop and saw him through the window. George was sitting with her, the woman who had stolen him from us. She was beautiful, and he looked genuinely happy in a way he hadn't been with me in years. Our eyes met briefly, and I turned away quickly, rushing home before I completely fell apart. That night, I sat on the floor of our bedroom and cried until I had nothing left. George was gone, and I had to accept it. I had to be strong for my daughters who needed me more than ever. The next morning, I took off my wedding ring and made breakfast for my children. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the world continue as if nothing had changed. The pain would last a long time. I knew that, but I also knew I wouldn't let it destroy me. One day I would wake up without thinking of him first. One day I would be happy again. One day I might even love again. But for now, I would focus on surviving, one day at a time. Because even in the darkest moments, life continues, and every ending carries within it the promise of a new beginning.